Of course, two of the biggest challenges for trucking operators is the need for their drivers to take mandatory rest breaks, as well as the hundreds of thousands of driving vacancies still unfilled in Europe alone. Now, part of the solution might be autonomous trucks. But what's been achieved so far? What operational, regulatory and infrastructure hurdles still need to be overcome? And what are the longer term possibilities? Could autonomous vehicles also one day lead to a significant reduction in cargo crime opportunities? Well, here to bring us up to date is one of the leading experts in this field, James Cooper, Business Development Director, On-Road Autonomous Solutions at Scania Group. And he joins us live from the Scania studio in Sweden. James, good afternoon and welcome to our Resilience at Risk 2 virtual conference. I have a long list of questions that I wanted to chat to you about, but I think first you're going to start with a brief introduction and show us a short video, which will be showing one of your autonomous vehicles in action. So I'll let you start with that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Yeah. It's really great to be here today. It's a really interesting area to be discussing, and I hope that I can give a little bit of insight and understanding about what we're doing today and where the industry is at when it comes to deploying commercial vehicles. I think it's safe to say that it's been quite a long journey with a number of evolving strategies and opinion. I think if you go back 10 years, most people would believe that all of our cities today would be filled with robo-taxis and all of our trucks will be driving autonomous goods fully, and we'll have already arrived at the end destination as technology. But the reality, as most of the times it always is when you bring new technologies to the market, it's more complex and it's taking a longer time than initially expected. But us at Scania, I'd say even 5 years ago, we probably had a vision which was built around introducing ADAS technology, safety features into vehicles, and gradually increasing that level of autonomy would eventually deliver us some kind of driverless product and creating value on the way. And we include products such as platooning and other semi-autonomous technologies in that roadmap. But 3.5, 4 years ago, we decided that we needed to do this differently. Driverless vehicles is not a normal product. It's not a normal development cycle. So we split out our resources. We created a division dedicated for the development of driverless technology. And since then, we've been building a strategy towards a truly driverless and commercial product. And that in itself has also not been a particularly straight road. I think, again, during this journey, we've been focusing on everything from ports to construction sites to on-road driving. But now, as a company, we stand here with a very clear vision and a very clear ambition about what we want to do with our autonomous trucks. And there's two areas we're working in. Firstly, and probably the one that's going to be commercial earliest, is our technology within mining and mining areas. But the other area that we're focusing on, and the area we're going to talk about mostly today, is around hub-to-hub driving, and how autonomy can fill a role and create value for customers in that application. And when I say hub-to-hub, it's a bit of a diffuse term, but it seems to be quite well spread now. But essentially what we're talking about is identifying key distribution centers and logistics flows within the market and creating loops which will do the middle mile transport autonomously with our vehicles. And the reason for that is there's probably two main drivers for why we're focusing particularly on that kind of operation. Firstly, and most importantly, is we see that that's the environment where this technology is going to be suitable and available first. The motorway, it's high speed, yes, but actually it's a very predictable, it's a very controlled driving environment, which means the technology will have the ability to prove itself and to test out the edge cases and scenarios very early on. The other reason why we focus on that area is that that's also where the high volume, very dense traffic exists, which means that we can create the scale that's required for the business model, even in the early phases. And autonomy isn't just in the future. Even our hub-to-hub products aren't still at the end of a roadmap. We are already today operating fully autonomous trucks in real traffic scenarios here on the motorways in Sweden. And we're doing that together with customers. We want to integrate real world logistics scenarios so that we can develop the technology, so that we can show that it's safe, but also so that we can show how this can fit into real transport flow and how it can start adding value to customers. So I think now would be a good time to show the short video we have prepared, and it can give a little bit of an insight into our current activities here in Sweden.
Today we performed the first autonomous transport operation in Europe with commercial goods together with Harvey Logistics. No tests, real business. We are on a journey towards a sustainable transport solution, and we want to take the lead to change the transport system. With that said, we need to extend our operation. We won't be able to do that on our own. We need to do that together with our partners.
Our customers are continuously expecting us to be leading the way and looking for new ways of doing things, more efficient but also safer and more sustainable. My view is that Harvey and Scania share the same vision for the future. We have the same wish to test and innovate and see how we can get better and better.
The hub-to-hub model are 3 legs. We're talking about the first and last mile. The first and last mile we are performing with a manual truck, and between the hubs, which is on the highway, we're driving with our autonomous vehicle, and we're monitoring the operation with a safety driver and test engineer on board. To be able to utilize operation close to 24/7 and therefore have a full utilization of the uptime, this will have an impact to the operational costs.
We believe that autonomy is not an either-or situation. We strongly think that there will most likely in the foreseeable future be a combination of human interface and autonomous. But it's also a way for us to ensure that our supply chains stay robust and resilient, and that it'll help us be a bit more safer on the road. It will relieve the driver from some of the difficulties and support the driver, and also help utilize the engine as sustainably and efficiently as possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that video with us, James. Now let's have a little bit of a discussion and a chat about it in a bit more detail. So a recent survey by the International Road Transport Union found that over 3/4 of road transport companies believe that autonomous trucks will become a viable option on the roads within the next decade. Are they correct? Do you think this is an achievable timescale, an achievable milestone?
Absolutely. I think that our history shows that it's very difficult to accurately predict exactly when we'll be able to be driverless and when we'll have a driverless product. But it's clear with the rate of the current development and the developments that are happening in the last few years that I expect we'll see a fully driverless product on the roads already in 2024 or 2025. I think this will most likely be in the USA first. That's where a lot of the development is happening. That's where they have a very excellent environment for operations in the southern states. But I expect that Europe will be quite soon behind that time schedule. And before the end of 26, we should have driverless operations also in Europe.
And what's the status of Scania's autonomous truck program today? You did mention you have some out in Spain, I think you said, with a couple of clients, but where are you with that?
So, as I say, we've been doing this for over 15 years now, but I think the last 3 or 4 years is where we've seen a huge change in the rate of development. So standing here today, as I mentioned, we have fully autonomous trucks in our mining sites delivering real customer demands. But on the road, we're still we're operating fully autonomously, but of course we still have the safety driver there as a critical role to ensure that we are safe. But these are not test scenarios and not laboratory scenarios. Our vehicles leave the depot in fully autonomous mode. They drive themselves to the motorway, and then they transport themselves 300 kilometers down the motorway in real traffic. And we're doing that together with a customer so that we can show how the flow and how the goods fit into that operation.
And what would you say your main achievements have been so far in this long journey?
I think we have whether you can show a fully driverless product is a huge milestone. But at the same time, getting our test licenses for real world operation, and even having that first sort of customer delivery was a huge milestone, because, as I said, it's the most important thing for us is to show the real world application, not a theoretical application. We want to show how this can be used, and that we are on the journey to making sure this is verified and safe and can be deployed.
You mentioned that the trucks that you've already got out there they're not test vehicles, they are fully autonomous vehicles. What are the technology and other issues that still need to be addressed to take away that safety driver in the trucks?
There's a number of challenges, and I think that the real answer is that, if everyone gives you an honest answer, is that we don't really know the full scope of the challenge ourselves. It's a very interesting question about how you can prove the safety of a sort of a software-based virtual driver. And there's a lot of thoughts, leadership, a lot of ideas about how that gets achieved. A lot of them involve driving lots and lots of kilometers to show that the vehicle is able, it's safe, and it's managed to handle any of the situations it's been placed in front of. So I think we will hope to see some developing legislation and some developing requirements from authorities, which will help guide us in how we can prove that this technology has reached the required level of safety. Beyond the software, of course, we have to then develop a whole new vehicle platform. This includes a different level of safety, of redundancy, ability to be able to drive in degraded performance modes, so that we can safely handle the vehicle if any particular critical system had an issue. And that itself has, of course, a timeline, which is for us as an OEM, and ensuring we get that integration with the software. So those are sort of the main technical challenges. And then, of course, probably even more important is this integration with customers, integration with logistics flows. We need to show how this technology can be used, not just create a product which is impressive but doesn't have any real world value.
So what would you say then are your key goals over the next few years?
So I think to temper expectation, we're not going to be driving sort of without a driver in the next couple of years in European roads. But what we really do want to do is expand our program of semi-automated test driving. So like the video we showed before, we want to expand the routes that we are operating autonomously, supported by a safety driver, and want to expand our customer partnerships so that we can get more and more customers involved in this journey, understand more about the requirements of what they have and how we can create a product which is valuable. And of course, while we're doing all of that, then we will be collecting data, we will be improving our system, and we'll be building a safety case to eventually remove the driver.
In the video, we saw the use of a hub network. How are these hub networks going to be created, and who's going to be doing the creating?
Well, it's very much our intention that we don't have to create a completely separate network of autonomous infrastructure. What we really want to do is show how any cross-dock, any loading, any distribution hub, any factory area could become an autonomous hub in the future. It's simply a scenario of creating a safe method for the vehicle to arrive and depart from that site. And our focus at the moment is how do we integrate this into the existing system? We don't want to add a level of complexity, because that's going to go against our goals for simplifying logistics. We want to enable our customers to handle these vehicles with the current infrastructure and resources that they have.
So what infrastructure challenges are we facing then, do you think?
Well, as most OEMs, we don't want to build any really critical demands on the infrastructure. Often, the main reason is that those costs often fall on stakeholders which aren't a direct beneficiary to autonomous driving. So it's quite hard if we build a safety case on requiring very advanced road systems or special communication methods, because it's hard for us to steer those costs and investments. Instead, we want to build a vehicle which you can look at as a very self-contained closed loop, which is able to manage itself in the environment which we have verified it in. Yes, we need to have things like a good GPS signal. We need to have a mobile, a data link to the vehicle. But these aren't systems which are necessarily safety critical. They're systems which allow us to smoothly operate autonomy and make sure that we can maintain uptime and give efficient commands to the vehicle.
Obviously, the technology is really, really exciting, but what would you say is the potential market size for autonomous trucks in Europe or even globally, indeed?
I think the market size it's interesting because we're talking about middle mile. A lot of it is going to depend on the flow that we're trying to fit within. But the experts within our company, Traton, have done a lot of research into this and look at breaking down the market. And already in 2026, we think that there's around 78 billion kilometers driven within Europe, which is very addressable by this technology. And if you look broader than that, I think the market in the USA is double that. And I think those are our primary focus areas at the moment, because there you have both the infrastructure and you have the challenges with driver shortages and high salaries, which really drive the need and the demand for this technology. I think other very large markets will, of course, be prime for this technology, but it'll be more about reducing the cost and making a more robust business case before we enter those.
So have you been able to quantify then the productivity or sustainability gains of, say, an autonomous truck versus the conventional truck?
And again, it's a very difficult one to quantify, because very much of that is more dependent on the system that the truck is operating in rather than the truck itself. So we cannot tell a customer to start driving 24/7 because they might not have a need for that or have a transport flow which demands that. But what we can offer with autonomous vehicles is a much more flexible, much less restricted way to utilize the vehicles. So it's no longer a challenge to drive 10, 20% more, because you don't need to have a full second shift of driver operation. And of course, as I said, these vehicles don't need to rest. They can operate 24/7 and you can maximize utilization. And that's really where we see the sustainability benefits. Our target with autonomy is not about selling a lot of vehicles. It's about getting those vehicles used as much as possible and utilizing those assets we create to the best effect.
A very high percentage of cargo crime in the EMEA region is happening when trucks need to stop for the mandatory driver rest breaks. In fact, we've been hearing more about that today. Do you see cargo security and loss prevention being part of the business case for autonomous vehicles?
I think I'll have to be completely honest with you here, and it's not something that I had originally had been thinking about before being invited to this conference. So for me, this is actually one of the fantastic reasons for being here. It's opened my eyes to a demand and a challenge in the industry which I wasn't fully considering. But if we think about how we will use these vehicles, there is definitely a potential that we can create a more safe and constant flow of goods. With the vehicles, you'll only ever want to stop an autonomous vehicle in a designated logistics or transfer hub. So no longer will the vehicles need to stop in a truck stop or on a lay-by or in an unprotected area. Instead, what we want to do is create small networks that work a little bit like how you utilize the train as a multimodal transport today. You can bring your goods to the autonomous destination, the autonomous launch pad. We can then operate without stopping fully autonomously through the network, arriving at the next distribution hub ready for collection. So by doing that, you've kept your driver local. They don't need to overnight in the vehicle. You've increased the speed of goods, and you've not created any points where the vehicle has to stop in a vulnerable location. You can instead take the vehicles all the way to safe, well-secure locations, which will hopefully help address some of the issues we're talking about.
I'm glad we've opened your eyes to that as well, James.
Yeah.
So liability is another issue, and if there are incidents involving autonomous trucks, how is the industry addressing this issue of liability?
Well, it's clear that today the governments and authorities see the driver as a very good single point of liability, and we are actively discussing with them about how that liability gets shared. And I think that's the key. It will be shared in the future. We will need to find roles around the system which are able to take the long list of things which the driver was currently responsible for. So operators within the terminals will have to be responsible for carrying out things like the vehicle safety checks and ensuring that it's been correctly loaded. The people monitoring in the control tower will be responsible for ensuring that they're not creating a risk and an unsafe situation on the road network. And of course, us as an OEM, if we are the ones responsible for putting the software in the vehicles, we'll need to increase our responsibility and make sure that we can guarantee the performance and the uptime of these vehicles when they're in operation.
Let's talk a little bit about cost, because autonomous trucks are reportedly going to cost substantially more than traditional trucks. First of all, is that the case? And if so, what's the return on investment proposal?
And it's a really good question, because yes, the technology is not cheap. There's some very expensive computers that are going into the trucks. There's sensors and cameras which have not been used before. So it's hard to say exactly where that price is going to land, but I think people can think of the truck probably costing about 1.5 to 2 times the amount that they currently do upfront. And of course, it'll come with some additional repair and maintenance costs as part of the ensuring that vehicle is running. But the drive and the value creation that we have from autonomous vehicles is so big that despite those additional costs, and despite the additional sort of operational cost that may be incurred in making sure that your system is able to handle autonomous vehicles, we are very confident we'll be able to offer sort of double-digit gains for our customers that want to operate this technology.
What industry support are you receiving with this work, James? And maybe is there anything that you still need support for, and any areas where TAPA EMEA members could help with?
So I think we see a huge amount of research projects. I think the MODI project, which maybe some of your members are aware of now, is a great example where we're bringing together sort of thought leadership and OEMs together with customers. For us, I go back to my point before, we really want to focus on the real world scenarios. We don't just want to focus on sort of the academic application of autonomy. We really want to focus on the commercial application and how what our customers need from the system in order to make it something which is value adding and something which works for them. So the contact and the input that I'm personally going to be looking for most in the coming year or two is more contact, more understanding from large sort of operators, from people which own the infrastructure within this system, and for people that are interested in deploying this technology, so that I can understand their needs and we can work together on how we create solutions for the products, which means it fits and it works within their operations.
And talking about real world scenarios, have driver shortages and lessons from COVID accelerated demand for autonomous trucks, do you think? Has there been any effect on the timescales that have been worked to?
I think we've definitely noticed an additional demand. I think it's made people realize that people look for smart solutions in securing up their supply chain and addressing some of the issues. And ultimately, it means that the business case behind autonomous is only going to improve as more and more of as driver shortage comes in and drives up salary prices and demand. To be honest, I wouldn't say that it's dramatically changed the pace of development. We are already working absolutely as fast as we can. There is, for us and for many others, there is no concern in the potential demand and the potential of this product. So we've been working as hard as we can to bring this to the market, and we're going to continue to do so. And but of course, as the more we can understand about the challenges, the more that we can understand about how we can address issues in the industry, the better it is for us to make sure the product is suitable when it reaches the market.
James, I think we've got time for just one more question. Many of our delegates will be aware of truck platooning. Can you explain how this works, and is it something that you see as having specific value?
So platooning, the concept behind platooning was that if you can operate trucks in a convoy, then there's potential, huge potential aerodynamic benefits, which can dramatically drop the cost of fuel for that operation. It was also seen as potential for an easier first step towards fully autonomous vehicles. If the vehicle just needs to follow the vehicle in front, it reduces the demands on the system and makes it more addressable and maybe faster to market. Scania, along with many others in the industry, however, we are no longer pursuing platooning as a product or a development, and that's mostly because we saw a number of challenges with its development. Firstly, if you consider the actual autonomy required in the vehicle, any vehicle in that convoy at any point needs to be able to handle the scenario that their convoy gets broken by someone on the road cutting in or creating a demand. So any vehicle in that convoy needs to be able to be the front of that convoy and drive fully autonomously itself. And if you've actually equipped the vehicles with that kind of capability, then you don't want to drive them in a convoy, because all that does is create a shock to the logistics system. You're increasing the batch size and you're putting more demands on coordination and complexity. Instead, it's better to let those vehicles drive independently. We also, in our early tests, we weren't seeing the aerodynamic benefits that were promised. And there's a number of reasons for that, very technical ones, which I'll try and avoid. But we weren't seeing quite the value creation that it was promising. So in the end, we decided instead to put that to one side and really focus on how we can create vehicles which can independently and drive without any driver.
James, thank you so much for joining us today from Sweden. It's really been a fascinating conversation, so thank you so much, and certainly a topic that we'll all be keeping a close eye on.